Well, good morning, and welcome to the Wisdom of the Soul, presented by the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. I'm your host, Michael Benner, and we're well into our second year now of weekly Sunday morning programs. Join us live whenever you can. You get the benefit of a meditation, pretty much near the beginning of each class, and some Q&A at the end, which I always look forward to. And I hope that those of you who are with us live this morning will think about participating as we get toward the last as we get toward the last 20 minutes of the class. And just if you have a question or a comment on today's topic, or for that matter any other, just summarize it in the chat box directed to Melinda, who is our co-host today. And when we get to that point, she'll call on you and either read your question or your comment and give you an opportunity to unmute and expand on that if you wish. Also, there's no need for you to keep your cameras on, but I'd like you to consider turning your camera on when you can, if you're dressed and presentable. It's nice to allow other people to connect with a face and make this real. If you're unable to join us on a given Sunday live, 11 a.m. Pacific time, we have the full class, the video on our YouTube channel, Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. And then I edit the audio track and podcast that to all players, aggregators, podcatchers, player apps. I haven't found one yet that we're not on. If you know of one, by the way, a podcast player that you see we're not there, let me know, because I'd like to get on board and be available everywhere. Right now, we seem to be on all players and apps, but there's new ones popping up all the time. Again, I appreciate you being with us here live today as we talk about why hurt people hurt people. That's our topic. Or maybe how hurt people hurt people. Before we go to the opening meditation, let me just say that emotional feelings are exceedingly contagious. And I'm not sure that we appreciate that our emotional exchanges are very similar to looking at yourself in a mirror. And there's great wisdom in recognizing yourself in the opposition that comes from the person you argue with, the person you're angry at, or the person you come to hate, or the person who, ideally, hopefully nobody in this class, but it can come to fisticuffs, to violence. And if it's not hitting each other or shooting at each other, maybe just throwing stuff to express this hostility that comes out of anger that's rooted in fear. Anger and hatred are very complex emotions, and rarely do I hear anyone dissemble these feelings. So let me just say that these are probably the biggest of emotions, negative emotions, so-called, because of the action, the potential for regrettable action and violence. So it helps that we understand that we not only manage our own feelings, but learn to manage those feelings in other people. You know, emotional intelligence breaks down into two areas. There's 4 pillars, 2 in each area. The first 2 parts of emotional intelligence, the first two keys or pillars are self-awareness and self-management of your emotion. But the third and fourth pillars are interpersonal. Intrapersonal is you becoming self-aware and managing your emotions. But 3 and 4 is empathizing, understanding other people's feelings through your experience of similar feelings in similar situations. Empathy, and you could even call it compassion. And then 4 is relationship management. So this is a two-way street. When they talk about facing your opponent and being defensive, which to the other one appears offensive, and so they become defensive, which to you appears to be offensive. That's what that's about. So part of the leadership that we're developing in a class like this, often about emotional intelligence as a portal to spiritual growth, is not only getting it together in terms of managing yourself and understanding yourself, but being a real leader and managing other people's emotions. You can do that. And then we can avoid that whole back and forth process. Well, you started it. No, I didn't start. You started it. No, no, no. You you started it. And it's like it's a candy mint and a breath mint. Both things are true, right? So with that set up, let's do our opening meditation, and then we'll address this whole process of why hurt people, who then hurt people, who then hurt people, and we end up dropping bombs on those we've never even met. Close your eyes, become comfortable in the chair, the bed, the sofa, the meditation pillow. With your eyes closed now, center yourself. Create and sense a feeling of being balanced so that you can sit erect, upright, without any tension whatsoever. Just sort of stacked above your hips. Move your head a little forward and back, a little left and right. Balance your head, so to speak. Let go in the shoulders. Feel the relaxation in your back going down to the hips. Feel that centeredness. Experience that balance. And then move your awareness all the way down to the soles of your feet. And feel them flat on the floor. Or if you're sitting cross-legged, feel supported by the floor. And make a connection to the ground, almost as if you are rooted into the earth. Human beings are both spiritual creatures and animal bodies. And the physical animal body is made from the food we eat, which comes from the earth. You are of the earth. Your physical body is of this earth. Connect to it. Feel electrically grounded to the earth. A nice way is simply to imagine how a tree feels to be rooted deeply into the earth. Certainly, the tree knows it belongs here, that this is its spot. This is where it grows. Feel that connection. And then Above your head, imagine standing open and receptive to a precipitation downward, like a gentle spring rain of a life force, an energy, a chi or a spirit that illumines and animates, that enlightens. It's often called love. Perhaps it's best understood as awareness or consciousness. Not our thoughts and feelings, so much as the awareness behind the thought, the awareness behind the feeling. There's even an awareness of being aware. Reflect on that for a moment. Allow yourself to think of times when you were not aware, unaware. Consider the variability of awareness. Sometimes we're somewhat aware. To some degree, we're aware. And at other times, not so much. Awareness is selective. You could listen to music and simply by forming the intention, allow your awareness to settle on the lyrics of a song, though you hear the whole. And at some point, you're attracted to the lead guitar, or the bass, or the drums. And the singer is still singing the lyrics, but you missed them because your awareness was selectively focused for a time on one of the other instruments. So when a drummer listens to the radio, they hear the drums. They hear the whole song, but the drums come forward. Imagine how someone in the film industry watches a movie. It's more difficult for them to enjoy a movie the way you and I might. Because a person who does sound design for a living, their awareness is selectively focused on what it took to layer all these different sounds on one another and mix them in. Are the crickets too loud? Or the lighting guy? Or the camera woman? Depth of field? They look at the movie entirely different than the average consumer. Is it any wonder that each of us has such a unique, not only diverse, but unique view of reality? When we consider the variability of awareness itself, paying attention to what's going on around you, or perhaps lost in thought, maybe exploring some memory from decades ago. And someone calls you out and says, "Are you paying attention? Did you hear what I just said?" "Oh, no, frankly. No, I didn't." "Well, why would you hear what I just said? I'm sitting right here in front of you." "Oh, well, I was lost in thought, unaware." "Why'd you run that red light?" "Gosh, officer, I thought it was green. I didn't see a red light." So it's a remarkable gift, but we would need to be aware of awareness itself. So developing self-awareness, the beginning of emotional intelligence, is not only considering how aware am I of the world around me, and am I being selective, noticing some things, if so, which things and why, to the virtual exclusion of other things that are right here, right in my face, but I don't notice and maybe have never noticed. To be aware of our behavior instead of just reacting reflexively, to consider the consequences of your behavior before you initiate it, to consider the alternatives and the options and how you can behave, the action you take, the words you speak, before you choose the action and initiate it. Just consider how often we fail to do that and just act reflexively and regret it later because we're unaware. And so too are thoughts and feelings. How aware are you of the thinking process? How often do we identify with an intrusive, negative, self-loathing idea that comes into your head? And because it occurred to you, you think it's your thinking, and so you hold on to it. You identify it as your thought. You give it a certain validity because it occurred to you, but it's just a thought. You don't have to believe everything that comes into your awareness. Once you're aware of being aware, you see. And so when we talk about, as is our intention today, why hurt people, begins with developing awareness of our emotional nature. Think of the number of times you or another has denied being angry in spite of the fact that somebody's obviously very, very angry, red in the face, yelling, tone of voice rising, threatening, feeling threatened, shouting, demanding, moving from creative into binary, either or, right or wrong, all or nothing. And then they shout out, "I am not angry. And if you say I'm angry, I'm going to bash you in the face," or some ridiculous contradiction of the denial of the fact that they're angry. They're unaware of being angry. The king of emotions, anger and hatred, its first cousin. I don't hate you. I don't hate anybody. I only hate people who are hateful. I hate hate. Sit with that for a moment. How is it possible to hate hatred? You become the enemy then. And yet it's so easy to justify, isn't it? Well, I only hate them because they're hateful. If they were nice, then I could be nice. You give your power away, don't you, when you do that? Well, if they accepted their errors and apologized, I'd have no problem apologizing. So your behavior is conditional. Your willingness to apologize or to supplant hatred with kindness is conditional on the other person going first. You give your power away. The leadership that comes from emotional intelligence allows us, it really empowers us to be in charge by initiating the change. You go first. You be quick to apologize, not defend. Quick to admit your excesses. Willing to get off the either or, I'm right and you're wrong because I know I'm right and you're different, so you must be wrong. There's no middle ground. To get off that and explore the middle ground, to find something positive that you can acknowledge in the other person's position. You know, the one thing we agree on is find some common ground. Or simply, I understand how you feel. I used to feel that way, but then I found this and this and this. But don't you see, you began by saying, I understand how you feel. That's all they wanted. They don't care if you agree. People who argue, they just want to be acknowledged. There's enormous power in that. Say to yourself, I am that awareness. I commit myself to being ever more aware of being aware. In fact, of being awareness itself. That's who and what I am, awareness. To be mindful. And the two parts of that, two critical components of mindfulness, is one, to sit in the present moment. Awareness of the past and awareness of the future is to be aware of your imagination. Images, pictures in your head. Yes, even your memory of things that you know actually happened is imagination. You conjure up some sort of videotape or audio tape recollection. But there's no guarantee you'll get it right. Every time you remember, you merely remember the last time you remembered. That's why it morphs and changes each time you tell the story. And the future. Well, that's pure speculation. So there really is no awareness of reality in the past or the future. The awareness of what's real is what's happening now, and now, and now, and now. The eternal unfolding, always new, always fresh, of each moment. Not a static or stagnant moment, but a beautiful, rich, dynamic, breathing in and out, coming and going, around and around that present moment. That's where awareness lives. And secondly, to be aware without judgment. To learn to suspend labeling everything as right or wrong, good or bad, better or worse, happy or sad, with me or against me, my way or the highway, love it or leave it. That is the mentality of a frightened, barely conscious being. Very little awareness remains when you find yourself suffocated, drowning in false dichotomies, binary thinking. So awareness is rich, full of color and light, unlimited possibilities and opportunities, always more choices than are immediately apparent. Be that awareness, be that aware, be awareness. You go from being aware that you are aware to aware that you are awareness. That's where freedom from discontent and suffering lives. There's pain in the world, but you can avoid suffering by being aware of it. It's so counterintuitive. There's a part of us that doesn't want to know about what hurts or why it hurts, much less that others who are trying to frighten us are frightened, that those who hurt and insult us are hurting for having felt insulted, suffering fears of inadequacy. Awareness is the way out. It's the elevated perspective that allows us to stand back or rise above it all and free ourselves from the, oh yeah, well, you too, buddy. As we said in this class a few weeks ago, when you find yourself being defensive, ask yourself, who am I defending? What does it mean to defend myself? Why am I doing that? What exactly am I defending within me? And secondly, why do I believe I need a defense? What is it that I'm protecting, that I'm afraid I might lose? If you were really so self-confident and self-aware, how often does it even matter what other people think? And why do you believe they're obsessed with thinking about you? they're, they're probably self-absorbed, worrying about themselves. What you see as offensive, they see as a defense. What you and I see as defensive is typically perceived as offensive. When you understand that, when you become aware of that, you can acknowledge it and rise above it, don't you see? It's like finding yourself in a tug of war, and then while you're pulling and resisting being pulled against, and you say, why am I doing this? And you decide to let go of the rope, you just won the game. You win tug of war by letting go. Just don't play the game. Don't take the bait. With big, fat, juicy nightcrawler, don't take the bait. You're not a fish. Just take a moment and consider how you wish right now to frame in your mind so that you can more fully comprehend and retain the insight that you are awareness itself. Behind your thoughts, awareness. Behind your emotions, awareness. Behind your speech and behavior, awareness, choice. Initiating instead of reacting. Being clever and creative. Behind your perception of the world around you, I am aware. Aware of being aware. And then I am awareness. Capital A. The absolute. Eternal and infinite. The energy that is never exhausted, that never dies. Aware when you're awake. You can be aware of your dreams while you're dreaming them. So-called lucid dreams. And while it may be difficult to comprehend, it's possible to be aware even in deep sleep. Deep non-dream sleep. If the alarm clock goes off, you wake up, some part of you is aware. Always. It begs the question, am I aware before I am born? Am I aware after I die? If awareness is energy, consciousness is energy, cannot be created nor destroyed. Even birth and death is an illusion. There's just awareness. But understanding that and embracing it, going from a belief to knowledge, is a process. Take it step by step. This is not all or nothing. Go slowly, step by step. But make this a hobby, an interest, a side hustle. Wow. A whole new aspect of life, becoming more aware of being aware until I realize I am awareness itself. It's called love. It's called consciousness. It involves imagination, intuition, intention, attention. It's awareness. The cornerstone of all emotional intelligence. Bring this awareness, this new and expanded awareness of being aware with you as we reorient ourselves with an intention to move into the wide awake state. And feel the gentle drifting up, floating toward that awake state. And then 3, eyes open, wide awake, back in the room now, eyes open, feeling fine, better than before, back in the room, better than before. All righty. See, it's difficult, but it's fun, isn't it? Be playful with this. I'm not sure I've spent much time talking about beginner's mind. I spend a lot of time with my private clients talking about beginner's mind. So offhand, I'm not sure how much time I've spent discussing it in this Sunday class, but it's a real important concept for those of us who wish to develop our awareness. And of course, that's not everybody. Many people are terrified at the very prospect of becoming more aware of anything. It's like this ignorance is bliss idea. I'd rather not know. One of the few television shows I like and follow regularly is called The Good Doctor. And Dr. Murphy, the main character, Sean Murphy, was dealing with a coworker, his boss, and sort of a father figure for him. And what he views in this father figure as denial. And he's sort of getting an argument back from the guy that he has a right to be in denial if he wants. And Sean says, no, knowing is better. He's very childlike and lacks social skills because he's on the spectrum. That's part of what's fascinating about the Good Doctor is that he's a savant, he's a real genius, but he has no social skills at all. So he is candid to the point of insulting people, typically. He's just so brutally honest and unaware, actually, in that area. But it comes to mind now because he said in last week's show, he said, no, knowing is better. Knowing is better. Being aware of the scary stuff, wading into the scary stuff. Yeah, you don't want to go to the doctor, and maybe you have legitimate concerns. If you call a plumber to come to your house, he or she is going to find a leaky faucet someplace, right? If you have a roofer come and check your roof, you'll find some need to bill you. I called the air conditioner guys the other day to service our AC. I know he's going to find something. So you go to the doctor. I don't know. I feel fine. I'm healthy. I don't want to go to the doctor. It's really motivated by I don't want to know. I'd rather not know. Ignorance is bliss. I'd rather avoid the fear, but in fact, you carry the fear. That's what fear is. This is the cornerstone of my book, Fearless Intelligence. That fear is not about danger, it's about not knowing. Not knowing enough about your situation, situational awareness, and not knowing enough about your ability to cope, self awareness. So fear is not knowing, don't you see? That's what fear is. It's how it feels to be, oh, I hate to use the word ignorant, but it's a pretty good word, and there really are not too many synonyms for it. Uncertainty is a good one. Unawareness, even confusion, misunderstanding, not knowing, not wanting to know. That's what fear is. We we know that, we're aware of it, when we recognize that the more information you have about an unknown situation, the less you fear it, even though the danger may remain constant. So the dictionaries are all wrong. Fear is not really about some danger or threat or hazard. It's about not understanding it. We fear things in direct proportion to our lack of understanding or misunderstanding. Knowledge is the antidote. Understanding is the antidote to fear, not eliminating the danger. Hence the Greek, know thyself. Or in the East, it was Confucius who said the same thing. One who knows others is wise, but he who knows himself, forgive the pronoun challenge, those who know themselves are enlightened. Wise to know others, enlightened to know thyself. How can you empathize and understand anything about the world around you beyond your experience of it, beyond what you already have embodied and experienced in your own life? And so now we come to hurt people hurting people. I could have titled this class today, Hurt People Hurting People Who Are Already Hurt. But that's too long for the internet. It gets cut off. Hurt people, especially those who are already hurting. Can we go to that? You see, when somebody hurts you or me with a nasty, mean, it could be even some offhand remark that was not intended to be hurtful. What they're doing is poking you where you're already hurt. Like somebody playfully needles you 3 or 4 times and you giggle, and then the fourth or fifth time they needle you with their long bony finger, you scream in pain, ow, you hurt me. And they say, what do you mean I hurt you? Why? We're just playing around here, and all of a sudden that hurt. And the other person says, yeah, well, I've got a bruise over here. It only hurts when, ow, only hurts when I touch it. The first person says, well, then I didn't hurt you. The other one says, well, yes, you did. And the first comes back with, yeah, well, okay, but you were already hurt, so I didn't really do that. Well, yeah, you did. You should have known. And this is just a metaphor for the way we hurt each other with language. Are you hip enough? Are you aware enough to recognize that when people hurt us, what they're bringing up most likely is something that's really old. Somebody says to an offensive person, "You're not my mother, you're not my father. Why are you talking to me like that?" Are they aware that the other person is not acting like a mother or father, but you're feeling like a child? And you feel like a child because the button they pushed, the trigger they pulled, comes from your childhood and your unresolved hurt? And that your anger is defensiveness? That anger is a defense mechanism to protect you from further hurt? That is very, very primitive? That your face gets red, you get all puffed up and big, you wave your arms around, and you start to yell. That's what you do in the woods if you are confronted by a bear, not a grizzly. You don't yell at grizzly bears. That's a whole different story. But your basic brown bear, you want to get big and wave and yell at them, bang pots together, say all the obscenities that you can, tell them you eat bear meat. And they turn and run like little scared rabbits. That's the whole point of getting big. So you yell at your children, or you yell at your parents or your spouse. That's what you're doing. It's a defense mechanism. But we've lost track of the motive. And we feel like we're defending ourselves. On some level, we know we're defending ourselves. But whoever you've directed that toward sees it as offensive. Whoa, what are you coming after me for? All I said was, well, you started it. You said that. I think it's real helpful to see how this is a two-way street so that we can, number one, manage ourselves, understand ourselves. That's where you begin with the intrapersonal. Wait a minute, I'm starting to get really angry here. By using relaxation and meditation and mindfulness and study, attending classes like this, you expand your awareness. You see the anger sooner. You see the hatred sooner. You're more likely to understand these feelings as containing hurt and sadness. Who recognizes the sadness in their anger while they're angry? Usually it's only as it fades and diminishes over time that you may be willing to acknowledge the sadness and the despair in that anger. And beyond that, to the roots, the fear. The fear of danger? No, that's the appearance. The fear of not knowing whether they have a point. Somebody says something nasty and hurtful to you, and you have a high level of self-esteem, and you know yourself, and you know that what they're saying is not true. How could it hurt? Why would it hurt? It hurts only in proportion to your belief that they may be right, at least to some degree, on some level. If somebody tells me, Benner, you are so stupid, you're such a moron, you don't have two brain cells to rub together, They can insist, they can jump up and down, they can threaten to expose me as a moron, whatever. I'm not really all that concerned because I may not be a genius. I'm no Einstein or Edison or college was hard for me. But I know I'm not stupid. I'm not ignorant. So it's like it bounces off me. It's not kryptonite. I'm bulletproof. But if they found some other character flaw, I'll leave it to your imagination, some other weakness of mine or vulnerability where I wasn't so self-confident, like how about, well, you're not very lovable, you're not very kind. I might have to go searching for evidence of that. Because maybe sometimes I'm not so kind. Maybe sometimes I'm very self-absorbed. Maybe sometimes I'm not as considerate as I could be. And so now they've got a foot in the door. Now they've found my Achilles heel. Now they can move in and hurt me. Especially if it's somebody that you love and care about. When we open our hearts to friends and family and others, the more we trust and the more open we are to the likelihood that we're going to get hurt by those people because we've let them in. That's why it's so important to develop trust in a loving relationship. Loving someone is not enough for a relationship to work. There has to be respect and trust. You have to have trust. If you're in a loving relationship where there's a secret battle going on of one-upsmanship, when the other's self-esteem relies on a need to put the other one down, to control them or humiliate them, to get a leg up, so to speak, that destroys trust. And love alone is not enough to maintain that relationship. So it begins by self-awareness, by understanding yourself, taking responsibility for your emotions, not as something done to you, but as your response. This is so big. All right? So they made me angry. Be careful of that kind of sentence structure. Nobody made you angry. You bought into it. No one can make you feel angry without your consent. If you knew the truth, it wouldn't hurt. And it's that fear of not knowing that creates the hurt, the anxiety, the sadness, and eventually the anger and the hatred. As Yoda says, anger and hatred is the path to the dark side. Not only because it leads to violence, which is so regrettable, but to suffering. Holding a grudge. I'm never going to forget. I'm never going to forgive. The great saying in Buddhism, holding that anger is like drinking poison and expecting another person to drop dead. Or like picking up a burning coal to throw at the enemy. Your hand is the only thing that gets burned. Anger, hatred, it's not a defense. It's self-destructive. You're not defending anything. You're attacking yourself. Well, there's plenty of opportunity in this day and age if you just expose yourself to a little bit of news and a little bit of what's going on at the extremes. Because I see tyranny in the far right, I even see tyranny in the far left. That's what extremes have in common. Democracy, mutual respect, lives in the middle. So going way out on the left and getting tyrannical about your strongly held beliefs, you get to a point where it's not that different from the right being tyrannical about their extreme beliefs. There has to be the middle way. We've done classes on the middle way. So, by understanding yourself and accepting all of your emotions as responses, your personal response to a situation. If I say the same insult to 10 people, I get 10 different responses because the emotional response is not a direct function of the insult, it's a reflection of the one who feels insulted. Feelings are not done to us. They're not the stimulus. They're the response. This is where emotional intelligence begins. Not knowing that generates fear and leads to these other hurtful emotions like anger, hatred. So when somebody triggers us, because there's so much on the right now in particular, this push toward autocracy, this white supremacist. Again, I've already acknowledged that there are extremes on the left as well. But damn, the right has the guns and they're willing to use them. All these mass shootings. It's no surprise that they all have far right Nazi literature. I mean, this episode now with the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, that he's effectively taking bribes is evidence enough of how corrupt government, even the judicial system, can be. But even more concerning for me is that the bribes he's taking are coming from a Nazi, a guy that collects Hitler's artwork and has a autographed copy of Mein Kampf. And his garden has statues of other dictators, including Stalin. And just last week on Fox, I hate to call it Fox News, it certainly isn't. When Tucker Carlson interviewed Trump, he's going on and on about how much he admires the dictators. How he has such respect for Xi in China and Putin in Russia and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, I guess is his name. He's been out of the news, so I forget those names. Kim Jong-un. While he undermines our alliances with democracies. These guys love autocrats and tyrants and dictators, so it's scary. It's hateful, and we find ourselves hating hatred. It's imperative that we develop the awareness to recognize the trap and refuse to hate hateful people and stop hurting people who are hurting. When people you despise because they're despicable hurt you, the tendency is to want to hurt them back. Don't do it. Use compassion to recognize their suffering. It's hard to do. To be compassionate for a tyrant for a racist, for a sexist, for someone with no conscience whatsoever, absolutely no empathy, totally power hungry, and I'm asking you to be compassionate. What that means is to recognize how much they suffer and that it's impossible to hate hatred. If you hate hatred, then you can't hate the hateful. It's a conundrum. You just can't do it. And so this is Christ saying, love your enemy. That doesn't mean be reckless and that you should not worry, or not watch your back, not be careful around somebody who's trying to kill you or wish you harm. Don't be reckless about it, but understand that they suffer. That if you don't see Trump suffering, if you don't see the torment that he puts himself in, then you have yet to recognize the extent to which we do that to ourselves. All of our torment is self-imposed. We accept it, we let it in, we buy into it. Again, no one can make you angry, no one can make you frightened, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Stop it. Fix yourself, develop your awareness, manage your feelings, then employ the empathy and the compassion that allows you to break the cycle. You can stop tormenting others, you see, and then justifying it because, well, we're right, we're not as bad as they are, we're working for peace and justice, and we want democracy. Well, yeah, that's all true enough, but hate is hate, anger is anger, fear is fear. Be fearless, be loving, be compassionate with yourself. There is such a thing as self-compassion, you know. And then you can influence other people to a much greater degree. And that's what we do. Last week's show, Sacred Activism, Making Good Trouble. In addition to marching, protesting, boycotting, educating our unaware friends. Remember, use questions. In fact, I'm going to go to the Q&A now, so hopefully you've put a comment or a little question in the chat box.
3, Michael.
Address it to Melinda. Say again, Mindy?
We have 3.
Good, good, good. Remember what we talked about last week when it comes as a social activist, socioeconomic, sacred activist. Interrogate your friends with questions. I'm using interrogate. Interview them with questions. You don't have to square off and oppose them and shout them down. You can actually be interested and ask questions and not set them straight. You get so much power. I mean, why do police officers hate it when you question them? Why does a teacher or a parent get so freaked out when you question them? Because the one who asks the questions has the power. You don't need all the answers. Nobody likes a know-it-all. You don't have to have the answers. All you need are good questions. The best reason to get answers may be to ask better questions. How about that? Be curious. The curious witness. Always question. Always. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, how do you think that's going to help? Well, if you're concerned with not being able to make a living, not affording childcare, you can't send your kids to college, you're on a budget, you're feeding the dogs rice because you can't afford dog food. Do you really think electing billionaires and those whose campaigns are paid for by the dark money from billionaires, you think the billionaires are the ones that are going to best represent you? Because then you could be a white billionaire too. A lot of this is pretty simple stuff, and you can expose it gently, with kindness and love and compassion. If you just gently question people, just turn the soil over a little bit gently and work it. Okay?
Jerry's got an interesting point.
Sure.
He says, can anger be helpful and even imperative?
Well, certainly, this is a great question. You will take the hit. You will always take the hit. I think if somebody walked up to Jesus Christ, poked him in the sternum with a long, bony finger, and said something nasty about his mother, then initially his nostrils would flare. Because it's a reaction that's happening in the brain faster than the mind can comprehend what has just happened. I think we saw a little of this when Christ overturned the tables of the moneylenders when they set up shop in the temple. He freaked out. And maybe later that day or a few days later, he thought to himself, damn, I'm the Christ. I could have handled that better. I hope they don't put that in the book. I wasn't really at my best. Then you see other times when he is at his best, like Sermon on the Mount, just mind-blowing. The truth and the wisdom. But he wasn't angry at that point. So initially, I think we'll all take a hit. It's how quickly can we recover from that? And that's why it's important to practice. Practice meditation, practice mindfulness in your daily life and affairs. Continually read and study and reread. I think it's important that I emphasize reread. Read the material that spoke to you deeply and profoundly the first time. Just because you read it a year ago or 10 years ago doesn't mean you won't benefit from a reread. When I do these classes, I often find myself saying the same thing over and over and over. I listen to tapes of me from 40 years ago saying the same material. And you know what? Often I learn from it. I learned from me on a tape 40 years ago, saying something I've said on a regular basis all of that time ever since. You just go deeper. It just becomes more profound. It's just like the picture broadens. So it's not just meditate, be mindful in your daily life and affairs, and read inspiring literature, but reread and continue the practice over and over and over. The best professional athletes continue to practice. You don't get to be the best in the world at some sport and then say, now I don't have to practice anymore. Thank God I can give up practicing. These are the guys that come early and stay late and are out there shooting hoops if they're basketball players, or in the batting cage if they're baseball players, or a musical performer doing scales and arpeggios, even though they're already one of the best in the world. So you got to practice. So is it imperative? Yeah. What was the first part? Is it beneficial? Was that the first part of that, Mindy?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Only to the extent that it wakes you up to its existence. If you hold on to it rather than let go of it or move through it immediately. dissemble it, break it down, see the fear and the ignorance and the confusion in your anger. Recognize it as a defense against something you don't need to defend yourself against. Find the sadness in it. Recognize how you're getting poked in an area where you were already hurt from long ago. That would be a benefit, wouldn't it? That anger reveals your heartache in areas that need, just like all hurtful feelings, have the silver lining, so to speak, of showing you where you've been hurt and where you need to work. But to hold on to it, to believe it's righteous anger, beyond that initial hit, that opportunity to wake up, now, if you pursue it, you become it. You become, as Pogo said, the enemy. The enemy is us and our inability to recognize what appears to be opposition or an attack or an affront as yourself in disguise. That would be the only benefit of these negative emotions, is to see yourself in others. Best to see yourself in others when they're being kind and loving. Then you can learn to do that too. Great question. Very, very. Who was that from?
That was from Jerry.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Jerry.
Larry's up next with a couple of comments.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Mouse isn't working, so I had to use the keypad to turn the mute off. But I just wanted to say hi to my favorite cousin, Sharon Gardner. She joined us for the first time today. So she's coming to us from Arkansas.
Welcome, Sharon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to see your face, Larry.
The other comment I had is I've become very interested lately in what changes belief. What's the mechanism? How somebody goes from not believing something to believing something, or vice versa. And I just like to hear any thoughts you might have on that.
Another very good question. I think it could be a couple of things. It could be a function of logic. That belief changed. I changed my belief because of a well-reasoned or set of well-reasoned arguments, logical, well, often I think of Hegel and Hegel's dialectic in the way logic unfolds, which is you start with a thesis. You get additional information that may reinforce, but if it conflicts, then you have an antithesis or an antithesis. Out of that conflict, that struggle, that healthy contradiction, comes a synthesis. So a thesis, then the antithesis, which merge up through the middle into a synthesis, a new understanding that transcends both the thesis and the antithesis. It's a new generation, it's a new iteration, which then becomes the new thesis, which inevitably is going to encounter some conflict, some new antithesis, and so the process continues. That's one way of understanding the mental way in which beliefs change. I think beliefs can also change based on emotional experience. People can tell you as a child, don't run into the street. Even if your ball bounces out into the road, don't just go running after it. Our parents took us at one point to the curb, had us look to the left, look to the right, understand that cars can come very fast out of nowhere. If they're coming straight at you, it's hard to know how fast, all of that. That's not just a belief, it's something we know to be true. And yet, a few months later, the ball rolls in the street and you run out to get it and almost get killed. Or maybe you do get killed, you know. Because the emotion said, I want the ball. You weren't really thinking. You were just acting reflexively from an emotional place. Excitement, fun, chase the ball, run into the street. On the other hand, if you do that and survive, the screecher breaks and the car comes to a halt just before you would have been hit, you will remember that, and your belief system has changed for forevermore. That's an extreme example of the way a belief could change very quickly based on emotions. I'm not sure how else to parse it, but I think it's, I guess the main way I would understand it is based on evidence and the conclusions we make in the interplay of thought and feeling back and forth. It's just a judgment or a decision that a belief evolves into knowledge through experience. Belief, experience, knowledge, and then something may happen that changes your mind, so to speak, changes your awareness, and you realize there's an exception to the rule. Or maybe I was totally wrong. Maybe I thought I knew this belief and I had given up believing and I was so knowledgeable. And then something, Melinda and I were talking before class today about cults, and she was recommending a book by a fellow that used to be a Moonie, but he stayed in school and he got educated and one day realized, oh my God, I'm in a cult.
Even
And if
half.
it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Do you want to mention his name in the book, Melinda?
Well, he has a website. His first name is Stephen. His last name is Hassan, Hassan. What actually happened is he forestalled his education. He was inculcated into the Moonies despite being brilliant and being an observant Jew who he bought the whole program, but it was an emotional hook that got him in. There were some women in the Moonies who were very kind of seductive with their pitch and very non-factual with their pitch. And once he committed himself, it was too late for him to, I mean, it's so invested in it emotionally that it became true to him. And 2 years later, when he woke up, he sort of couldn't believe how deep he was in it. And he invested his life's work. So he's an expert on cults and why we joined them. Fascinating work. He has an interesting website. If you like to pursue that, I think you'll learn a lot.
Say his name again.
Stephen Hassan, Hassen. Has a whole bunch on YouTube. You'll find him. He has what they call the bite model of recognizing destructive cults, and that we are all, the fascinating thing is we are all, no one's immune to joining a cult. At the right time, the right place, the right thing said to us, boom, we're in.
Well, you know, even nationalism isn't a cult. A Freudian slip, occult, is a cult. When you see people chanting USA, 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 I've never heard a crowd chant world, globe, everybody, go humanity, humanity. You know, I'm a big Michigan State fan. Why do I like Michigan State and think University of Michigan is a bunch of demons? Because I went to MSU and my father and mother graduated and my grandfather graduated. at the turn of the century from MSU. So I bleed green and white. I mean, I'm not serious about it. I'm not going to, I haven't really joined anything, but we have these allegiances to country, to college, to our high school, to our community, uh, to our nation. So people like to join. They like to be part of things. And
Right. Michael, Jack has a comment. There's one more ahead of him, but he has a quick comment that I think segues. He talks about righteous anger, the motivation of righteous anger, i.e. Martin Luther King, if you just wanted to riff on that, and then we'll go to Ignacio.
fine, you call it, Jack.
Well, anger is very motivating, and often it motivates us to do things we regret. But I do think there is a kind of higher level of anger, which often is perhaps a bit less personal, when people become angry about injustice, angry about things that are wrong in the world. And I think there is a kind of higher anger that motivates some people, and is able to motivate them to continue to fight when it's extremely difficult. And the fight that Martin Luther King undertook was horrendous in many ways, what he and so many people went through. But I think there is that kind of higher anger that makes you willing to fight, but for higher things, and hopefully in a higher way, which is another thing that was really evident in the way they fought. I wish there was more of that evident in the way fights are handled these days by people that claim they are fighting for the good.
Well, again, let me acknowledge that, because I have no desire to contradict you. I can't really disagree with you other than in terms of semantics and the way we use the word. To me, that higher form of anger that I'm acknowledging in your comment is called love.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, welcome.
Hi.
So the point where it's transmuted, when you recognize that it's not anger in the first chakra, in the groin, which wants to be violent and fight and answer anger with anger and hatred with hatred and fear with fear. When it's lifted into the heart, you said it's higher. Yeah, it's that much higher, 4 chakras. It's transmuted. And this is what Jesus was trying, I believe, what he was trying to express in love your enemy. And that has survived, that axiom, that aphorism, has survived for 2,000 years when almost no one knows what it's about. I mean, talk about denial. Find an evangelical who's going to riff on love your enemy and explain to you what that means. They don't even talk about it. The farther right you go in Christianity, the more fundamental you get, the more they focus on the Old Testament and ignore the Sermon on the Mount. Turn the other cheek. Forgive, love, be merciful, be kind. All of that stuff is just, I heard an evangelical say, Jesus is not a sissy. I don't think they get it. I don't think they understand. But I love your comment because, yeah, that's the higher anger you're talking about. And if we make it deliberate and purposeful to transmute that anger, that animal-based fear that says kill, lash out, or at least be equally as nasty, lift that up into the heart. You still have the motivation, you still have the fire, You still have that righteous indignation. Love is not such a passive thing. Love isn't, let's all chill out in the beanbag and pass the bong around, or more wine and women in song. I mean, the anger can be marching.
Yeah.
And like John Lewis, putting yourself out there, walking over that bridge in the summer, knowing you're going to get beat up.
Good trouble.
Good trouble. That's
Well, it's like the wrathful deities in Buddhism.
Yes.
They're pictured with fangs,
Yes.
and being
Long tongues,
long
snake-like
tongues,
tongues. Yeah.
and skull necklaces,
Right.
meaning that they mean business, but their motivation is entirely loving and
Protective.
liberating, good.
Yes. They're protectors. Yeah, that's the idea. Thanks, Jack. Good point.
Sure. Thanks.
Who
There
else,
is
Wendy?
one very interesting comment from Ignacio. He says, since prosperity and progress can only develop in peace, how can we return to it? How can we turn a dictatorship into a democracy again? And of course, he talks about being from Central America and keeping an eye on South America, but it certainly is a worldwide phenomenon now.
Yeah, again, the consciousness, the awareness that is love. That, I mean, if you look at how do we replace dictatorship, autocracy, oligarchy, plutocracy, kleptocracy with democracy, that's sort of a top-down challenge. I think we have to work from the bottom up. So first, be the change, as we discussed last week. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be that peaceful person. Don't take the bait. As we just discussed with Jack, transmute your righteous indignation into love and harmony, and educate people with questions rather than finger wagging opposition, setting them straight and reminding them what morons they are and how stupid they are. And it's obvious you never went to school. I feel these feelings. There's lots of times I want to say that stuff, but I choose not to. I have to think it through carefully and go, wait a minute, that's not the best way to win somebody over. Right? To tell them they're stupid. Ask what are your concerns? Using questions. So we educate ourselves and we educate other people. We treat ourselves with loving kindness. We treat everyone else with loving kindness, especially the enemy. They need it more than the people you feel safe loving. Then you build community so that that's reflected in the school board that's more concerned about weapons of war than books exposing America's racist history. That's not where the danger is. And maybe educate, these school board members. Do whatever you can to educate, to uplift. Ask yourself, why am I not one of those reactionaries, one of those hateful people? Why have I chosen not to have guns? 2/3 of Americans are unarmed. 70% of Americans, 70% of American households have no guns. And yet we have more guns than people. So somebody's got 3, 4, 5, 6 guns. They're terrified. How do you eliminate fear? That's really the question. How do you eliminate fear? With love. How does love eliminate fear? The way understanding eliminates ignorance. Ignorance does not oppose knowledge and understanding any more than a shadow opposes the light, or cold opposes heat. Cold and shadow and ignorance and evil, for that matter, are completely devoid of substance. They exist as the absence of some energy or presence. Darkness has no direction, it has no speed, it has no source. It is merely the absence of light. So too cold, merely the absence of heat. Cold is not a thing. It's real enough, but its existence is a function of the absence of a real energy that's measurable. Heat. Close the door, my mother used to say. You're letting the cold in. No, actually, I was letting the heat out. That's an important distinction. And so it is with ignorance. Ignorance does not oppose, it may seem to in certain situations, knowledge and understanding. Ignorance is the absence, and so too the evil, wickedness, corruption is the absence of love and understanding. Fear and ignorance, the enemy. Love and understanding, the solution. You work that however you can from the ground up. You build alliances, friendships, alliances, communities, and it spreads. And it's a long struggle, and it's been going on for what? One was in the Neolithic Revolution, 40,000 years.
Michael, if I could just add to that, I was thinking of Greta Thunberg, the Swedish environmental activist, and her whole, the whole movement that she had started when she just sat down and didn't go to school and held up a sign.
Mm.
Did that for days. And I guess my difficulty is believing that what I do could have such impact. I
Yeah.
don't discount, it's just me, it's just my little effort, what can I do? But that's fallacious thinking.
Margaret Mead, this is a good place to conclude today's class. Margaret Mead, for all that she contributed, is undoubtedly best known for a single quotation, which I can only paraphrase, but it's something like, "Never doubt that a small group of committed people can make a difference in the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Small groups of committed women and men
Mm-hmm.
founded this country on a protest. A small group of people, including the president, John Kennedy, decided not only that we could go to the moon and counter Russia's domination of space with that little Sputnik satellite, but do it within the decade. And that was 1962, and 8 years later, we're on the moon. Just, we can do pretty much anything we commit ourselves to. And like the Martin Luther King quote about the arc of justice, it's a huge, long project here, but goodness is on our side. Truth and justice, wisdom, beauty, goodness is on our side. The wind is at our back. The forces of tyranny and injustice and division and wickedness and hatred and fear don't have the universe on their side. Indeed, that's what all of this is about, is bringing heaven to earth. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We're here as agents of the divine to redeem wickedness, evil. Let's forget this word sin. Corruption, self-centeredness with a greater good. And you do that in your daily life and affairs and insist on in all of your affairs, being the kind of person you wish others would be. I know it sounds like a long struggle. It is a long struggle. And yet, if you look back, you'll see results. We are moving forward. In fact, it's the moving forward that has created the right-wing hysteria. They're terrified of change. And is some of the change excessive? And is there some bullying on the left and some tyranny on the far left? Yeah. But the pendulum will swing. It'll even out. It'll be okay. When we have love in our hearts, all things work together for good. Even the appearance of negativity and fear and hatred. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here today, especially those like Sharon, I think it was, who are new and with us for the first time. Wherever in the beautiful world you happen to be, I'd like you all to unmute and say your hello, goodbye, and thank you. And I will say mahalo and aloha, namaste and salam.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to be
Bye.
here.
Bye, Larry.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Bye, Sharon.